thou, Father
Regina
of the poor.
and I decided that this prayer will be what gets us into heaven, and not for reasons that you would think.
Et tu, Vincenzo? Et tu.
I agree with everything you say, Father, always.
Whatever, you just agree with me.
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Holy Spirit, Lord of light, from thy clear celestial height, thy pure beaming radiance give. Come thou, Father of the poor, come with treasures which endure. Come thou, light of all that live. Thou of all consolers best, thou the soul's delightsome guest, dost refreshing peace bestow. Thou in toil art comfort sweet, pleasant coolness in the heat, solace in the midst of woe. Light immortal, light divine, visit thou these hearts of thine, and our inmost being fill. If thou take thy grace away, nothing pure in man will stay. All his good is turned to ill. Heal our wounds, strength renew. On our dryness pour thy dew. Wash the stains of guilt away. Bend the stubborn heart and will. Melt the frozen, worn chill. Guide the steps that go astray. Thou on those who evermore thee confess and thee adore. In thy sevenfold gifts descend. Give them comfort when they die. Give them life with thee on high. Give them joys that never end. Amen.
Hallelujah.
When you read it from memory, it's more meaningful. It's alright, we'll get a different one for each semester. So, Bree, your assignment, or no, you don't have any assignments. Can't wait till someone interns for me. It's going to be awesome. Alright, ethics. So, yesterday's class we were talking about. So, ethics is the philosophical reflection on our human actions. Now, there's many ways that we could approach the class. Because you could reflect on actions from many points of view. You could reflect on actions in terms of what is a human action. You could reflect on it from the point of view of right versus wrong. You could reflect on it from the point of view of how you make decisions or any part of the action. Ethics is huge. I could give you a whole class on what is choice. How do you make a choice? Another class on what is true freedom. Another class on politics, political freedom. You know what I mean? Like, you could just keep going on and on about ethics. So what we want to do, I want to focus you in on, is specifically the thing that, since I've only got one class with you, I want to focus in on this question of right versus wrong. Because this is where you as missionaries are going to be challenged all the time. To do that, as I described before, we're going to have kind of an arc to the course. A beginning, a major part, and an end. We're in the beginning part. We're right here. We're in the next class, 3, 4, and then we hit the major part of the course, 8 plus 4, as we arc out. The major part of this course will be looking fundamentally at the question of human choice, and then the arc out of the course, we will be looking at natural law. The arc into this course is letting you get rid of all of the reasons why you wouldn't understand the main body of the course, so that then you can actually get the most out of the end. Okay? So this first one, so the theme of the course is going to be my ability to say something is right and something is wrong. And so right away, we're challenged because we say to ourselves, wait a second, there is no such thing as right or wrong. Relativism. I remember one of my SJI students in my very first year at SJI said, I wish you'd give us a course on relativism like Dr. Sri gives. And of course I didn't care about all that. So let's do a course on relativism. The situation of relativism is a really complex one. Okay? Because what it means is that truth is a judgment only an individual can make for himself. A relativistic claim is, we just hear it as like a bad word, relativism, but actually what it's trying to say is that only you can say what is true for you. It's actually not that stupid. You could think of it as stupid, but it's actually not that stupid. Because I'm going to make the case, first of all, for relativism, and then I'll show you why it's stupid. Because in a relativistic world, what they're saying is that, from the point of view, first of all, you could say, of your senses, perspective is everything. And that perspective can come from the point of view of your angle, obviously in terms of vision. But it can also come from the point of view of the time that you see something. It can come from the point of view of your organ, your sense organ. If your eyes are cloudy, then the world is cloudy. And if I say that the world is clear, it's only because my eyes are clear. Who's to say which one's right? Or why would you say that the world isn't cloudy when it is for him? That'd be from your organ. Or from time. When I see something here, and then another person says the same thing here, it's not quite the same. Because between here and here, the thing has changed. It has mildly degraded. Everything in the world is in constant flux, like a river. And you can't put your foot in the same river twice. Everything is flowing, and if you touch it here, it's not the same thing as when you touch it here. It's a whole different thing. So when I meet Vince now, and then I meet him after I finish the next sentence of joy, again, he is now a little bit different because he's heard the phrase, the sentence of joy. Everything is changing all the time. This goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. This idea, the perspective of everything. This goes, you got I'm trying to remember the Greek philosopher's name. But the ancient Greeks, all the way before Christ, were saying this. Heraclitus said that reality is a river, and you can't put your foot in the same river twice. Well, if that's true, then everything's relative. It's relative to when you heard it. If I'd say that, you see this, for example, Donald Trump. Wow, what a scumbag. Yeah, that was 10 years ago. Oh, okay, yeah, what a good guy. Or you can make the same thing about Melania Trump. I guess immodesty 5 years ago. Now she's the first lady. Everything changes. Everyone changes. There's nothing like black and white. Now you can, of course, Hillary Clinton's goes without saying because she never changes. She's always just that. No, I'm just joking. But you know what I mean? Like we're. It's amazing how even when you watch the media coverage, they'll be all upset about this, and then the next day they won't even talk about it anymore. And we can have the same idea about right and wrong. Look, when you're 20, that's what kids do. Now I'm 25. I'm different. If given enough time, things change. Angle. So this is the idea of perspective of everything. It also goes not just from the senses, but into your cognitive judgment. Now this was particularly sponsored, this thought was particularly sponsored by a guy named Immanuel Kant. Kant developed the whole idea of modern psychology. That's why we call it modern psychology, because it was invented. It was invented by Sigmund Freud in 1880. And he got his modern psychology from Immanuel Kant's understanding. For Kant, the mind only sees what is real through its own prism. It's a very, very strong objection. Now, Kant's philosophy itself is not very strong in the sense that it's easy to rip it apart. He's got some glaring omissions where he just makes stuff up, But this thought that he puts forth is actually extremely strong. Why? Later on, a phenomenological approach to things, phenomenology, will try to combat Kant and try to give a realistic perspective. So if you hear that word phenomenology, it's just a word that they made up. Okay, so seriously, it doesn't mean anything. It means it's a word they made up. But phenomenology. And the idea is that you look at a thing's appearance. It's phenomena. Like a phenomenon. Phenomena. You look at its phenomena, its appearance, because you can't really see what a thing is except through the prism, your own prism. So I just throw that out there, but I'm going to focus in here. This idea of the cognitive judgment is really powerful. If you want to make it simple, because I've only got one class to form missionaries for the modern world, look at the way that emotions, always, emotions, I should also put memory, I should also put mood, I should also put temperament, I should also put your rearing. Great word, means the way you were raised. But you remember that you raise cattle and you rear children. Huh. That comes all the way from my German teacher in high school. I don't agree with that at all. I can't believe such pigs would actually exist in this world saying these things. Children. Emotions, rearing, memory, mood, temperament, race. Why not say that? Absolutely. The time of day, to get into more minutiae. These always cloud or even determine your judgment. If you are a modern Washingtonian who's 29 years old and a teacher makes a joke about rearing children by spanking them, you will always object. For some strange reason. You will always think, this is a horrible thing. How could he ever make a joke about spanking children? That's so old-fashioned. Well, that means that your judgment of things isn't square. And what Kant would say is it never can be square. The idea that you can have objectivity is gone. There is no objectivity. Pure subjectivity. And then he takes morality, he says, what do we do with morality? What do we do with ethics? And he's like, it's just something that's inscribed in your will. Ethics is categorical imperative. It's something that you just know inside that you have to do. And it's God who puts it there. You can see he's kind of stuck. It's a lousy kind of ethics. But it's an ethics that has dominated our world. Because Kant won the discussion. If he had a better marketing agent, if someone else, Aristotle had a better marketing agent, he would have won. But what happened was Kant was picked up by the political people and said, now we've got a theorist that we can really change things. It'd be kind of like what we see going on with Common Core and gender theory. So if I really wanted to become famous, I would make a philosophy of gender that then the National Education Committee Board would be like, oh, that's amazing. We need that in Common Core. Because now he's actually explained it. And I would create all kinds of whatever I wanted to create. And then suddenly I would be known. There'd be the Cromley School of Thought, which has shaped the world. That's what Kant did. Kant's writings were revolutionary because he represented a brand new way of defining the whole world. And the university professors started picking him up. And they started writing books. And those books ended up forming things like the Communist Manifesto, like atheist ideologies all over the place, because finally we didn't have to talk anymore about God or truth. Instead, religion was of the will. Knowledge of God was something that I had because of morality, but morality was something that was just a law in my heart that I have to follow. And I couldn't reason my way to moral principles. I could reason my way to moral principles, but it wasn't a reason based upon reality, but a reason based upon logic in itself. So it's a really bad presentation of Kant, right? So my point here is not to present Kant. That's the basic thing you want to get out of Kant is this. The mind only sees what is real through its own prism. So an example of that would be if I were to take one marker and another marker. This is kind of fun. Now we're to silently do this. And then I were to ask, Bree, what happened?
Those markers, you just had some kind of play on what, like there was a relationship between the markers, and then there was a fight, and the black marker won over the brown marker.
Vince, what happened?
The black marker was a girl, the brown marker was a guy, and the guy asked the girl to dance, and they were just about to dance, and then she noticed that his girlfriend was up against the wall, so that she slapped him, and he fell off the table.
Regina, what happened?
You just wanted to throw a marker off the table.
I see. So Kant would look at that and then say, now, who is to say what's right or wrong? It depends on your culture, on your race, your temperament, your mood. So we need laws, but these laws aren't rooted in reality. They're rooted in the mind and the need that we have for law. So Kant was not like some sort of like radical dude. He was a very conservative guy. They used to say that they'd set their clocks in the town of Königsberg by Kant. He would do the same. It's called the Philosopher's Walk. You can go to the town and do the Philosopher's Walk, which I'd love to do someday. Which is the walk that Kant did every single day, wearing the same clothes at the same time, and set the clock to Kant. So because he was super orderly, calm dude. But you can see what this ends up happening. Everyone sees the world through their own prism. And therefore there is truth. The truth is inscribed in us by God as a commandment. Trusted. Everything to this, Kant, becomes the basis. His response, there's a response to it that says, this is very true, because it's hard to deny this. This is very true, but you can still talk about realism. That's called phenomenology. But that's the history of philosophy a little bit. What ends up happening is that this spawns a whole other field through Kant to a guy named Comte, who's a child of Kant. Comte comes along 20 years after Kant, takes up his idea, he loves it, and he's the father of what we call sociology. The study of societies, the study of political organizations, the study of communities. This sociology is huge because it's the study of cultures, but it's done from a scientific point of view. So what it ends up doing is giving data that's verifiable through experimentation, data to this type of coding. So I know the influences on you by your rearing and by your culture, and I can now predict the way that you'll view women. So the idea that women have a special role in society that men don't have, and that men have a special role in society that women don't have varies from society to society to society. And we do studies and we see that in this society this happens, but not in this society. And we see that the societies in a certain part of the world, like the Western Europe / Americas, have this view of things, and they're simply imposing it on India and on Malaysia and on Pakistan and on this part of the world. So now instead of talking about truth, we talk about culture, history. So all this type of scientific structure for cultures, from its history to its climate, to its government, to its religion, to its all of the different factors in order to understand and explain, more than understand, but explain why we do what we do. So now when you come along and you say, you know what, it's wrong to have, to get drunk. Someone will smile and say, that's your puritanical Americanism, isn't it? Puritanical Americanism? What? Yeah, you're an American, and so therefore you come from linked to the Puritan tradition. And the Puritan tradition is very against alcohol. And so the reason you're against alcohol is because you're an American Puritan. You've been convinced that's right because it's been encoded and enshrined around you by all these different cultural mechanisms, from your dad to your school to songs that you sang about how drinking is evil, to your tradition, to everyone rewarding you not drinking till you're 21, blah, 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 blah. If you came from Ireland or you came from France and you were raised with alcohol, you would see that getting drunk is part of life. And then you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And they'd say, well, then what exactly isn't? Where does it stop? The foundations of relativism, this is, I guess, the point that summarizes this, and I'll move on to the next point. As you can see from this explanation, this is just a real brief history of it, right? Like I could do a lot more about it. I wanted to show you all that to show there's a lot of thinking that goes behind these common judgments. You guys are at the end of the food chain. At the beginning of the food chain, you have philosophers. They actually rule the food chain. Philosophers educate. That's why they're so powerful. And by their education, who do they educate? Politicians. And the politicians, what do? They create laws that govern cultural forming agents. And what do these people do? They form children. And Vincenzo, who's riding a skateboard with his iPhone in his ears, dressed just like all of his friends, because he's told to. And I do the same thing. Sorry. He's told to. Why? Because you can't be dressed dumb. You got to look cool. And so the culture forming agents will determine how you dress, what your iPhone looks like. Dr. Dre's Beats, what do they call Dr. Beats?
Dr.
Crazy
Dr.
big
Dre.
headphones, which are cool only because they have his name on them. Otherwise they look completely ridiculous. But they're actually really cool because the cool people all wear them. And the cool people all wear them because they know how to do that. Well, they're allowed to do that and even encouraged to do that by politicians who could stop them from doing that. They could outlaw that. They could also encourage it and say, no, we're going to give them away for free. We'll give you a free iPhone. Or whatever they want to do. They could, this is where the politics fight, right? Because they're like, why is it that our food in America makes us fat? Every other country in the world, they're not fat. We are the most obese country in the world. Why? It's because our food has all kinds of garbage in it. Why? Because our politicians are controlled by the lobby. But if our politicians actually said, you're going to eat well, everyone would think eating carrots was awesome. So this works. Where did the politicians come from? Well, the politicians were educated according to a certain philosophy. The number one kings are the idea makers. That's why at SJI you have these classes. Because we want to reform that mind. Otherwise, you just walk around with your Bible and like, God told me, and you're ineffective. But if you start to understand the underpinnings of these things, you're able to say, no, I see that when you say that abortion is a woman's choice. You're actually just the voice. You're way down here of a culture that said freedom is super important and we should fight the machine. And that culture was manipulated by politicians who themselves were educated by a philosopher. Can I see this? So if I can get a different philosopher in your brain, I can enable you down here to understand a different type of system. And so the philosophers themselves, you have two types. You have an idealist, that would be like Kant. I've got this idea. You only see through your own prism. Oh my gosh, it makes sense. I'm famous. And then you've got realists, like Aristotle. The difference between the two is huge. The idealist philosopher, like a Kant, they start with an idea. They start with a hypothesis. And they see if it fits reality. A realist starts with reality and fits his ideas to it. One could say this is relativistic. It all depends if you're an idealist or a realist. And the realist would say to you, you have no alternative. The one thing I'm doing, I can guarantee you as a realist, is that I can have an objective discussion with you. What we're giving you at SJI is realism. And it's not just SJI, it's the Roman Catholic Church that wants you to have realism. Because it gives an objectivity to things. Relativism is the direct result of idealism. If I can start with an idea and see if it fits reality, then my conclusions about reality depend on my idea. Bang. See how that works? So I have an idea. The idea is that human freedom is what makes us human. Okay, that's an idea. That's an idea. Not intelligence, not nature, not your body. It's your freedom that makes you human. Okay. Now, I need to be human. My freedom makes me human. Any law that would get in my way of my freedom, therefore, is unhuman, inhibiting, and I must fight it. This is why you have people crying when Hillary Clinton loses. How could they be crying? They're crying, they're weeping. Why? Because in their heads, there is now a violation of their fundamental dignity. I can't be free anymore. They're going to limit women's choice. Limit women's choice. It's amazing, isn't it? Well, where does that come from? It comes from they have an idea, and then they're seeing if it fits reality. In a realism, you're like, what is human? Let us first see, and then make sure we live accordingly. Okay? So, relativism comes from an idealistic philosophy. I become relativistic about my conclusions when I start with the idea that everyone has their own ideas. Therefore, everyone has their own judgments. And it's not that dumb. You've all got your different perspectives, you all have your different histories, your different cultures. If you guys were all Buddhists, African American slaves, or African slaves that were transported to India, you wouldn't have these same ideas, would you? No, I wouldn't. I see. It's all chance. So now one culture imposes itself upon the other. And this is unjust. Who are you to say how they should act in India? And then they break it down, right? And they say, well, who are you to say how they should act when they're 16? Who are you to say how anyone else should act? And then you're stuck. And that's where relativism starts breaking down. This is because, and so now I'm going to start to criticize it. Where does it stop? Where are their limits? So, in the end, what they say is, well, common life requires some laws. And what's the basis of those laws? Based on a vote by the majority. But you see how this breaks down so quickly. Because if you say the majority of Americans are against Donald Trump, well, it doesn't work. They didn't vote. And besides, I don't think that's the case anyway. But like, you see, like you take a vote by the majority. Well, that means that the minority gets crushed. But what if they don't want to be crushed? Then they have to leave the society. That just doesn't really work. Number one, it doesn't work because this keeps becoming more microscopic. Holland, for example, they say in Holland you can smoke marijuana and you can have legalized prostitution. In Las Vegas, you can do legalized prostitution, but you can't smoke marijuana. But then you break that down and you're like, well, wait a second. Is it allowed here? Is it allowed here, here, here? And there's no limits to it in terms of size. And there's also no limits in terms of justice. So if the majority of people said that we should kill the Jews, which they did in Hitler's Germany, did that make it okay to kill the Jews? In a relativist stance, you'd have to say, there's no way to say there is no right or wrong. And what happens then is all of that works really well until someone comes and kills them. Where does evil stop? What we're seeing today, I think, is a society that actually is redefining evil. And what's the upshot? That's what's kind of cool. Let's suppose you take it all the way. That means that goodness equals utility for my own advancement in terms of pleasure and power. In other words, materialism. The more relativistic we become, the more materialistic we will become. You can write that down. And the reason is so good. Because once you say there are no way for me to know the truth about things, then half of your being, your upper half, dies. What do you live for, Mr. Relativist? And they'll be like, well, other than I can be happy. How do you define that? Good house, a good pipe, calmness, the ability to read what I want to read. It's materialism. And a good thing will be what enables me to advance my own life. So you have materialism and you have individualism that flow necessarily from it. Because if I can't discuss with you about what we ought to do and unite in a war in order to fight for truth and justice, well then I just want you to leave me alone. A guy who shows this is a philosopher named Thomas Hobbes, as in Calvin and Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes actually held that the high point for a human being was to have his own cottage, grow his own cabbage, and live a contented life. So different from Aristotle. Aristotle said the point of a human being is to contemplate eternal truth so much that eternal truth becomes his own truth, and man becomes God. Mechanics, book 10, chapter 9. You're like, between that and smoking a pipe and planting your cabbage, wow, what a vision. So that's the weakness of it. The weakness of it is that they'll kill your children, they'll kill you. Just smoke your ganja and be quiet. And so your society becomes, by becoming individualistic, this means that the collectivity is weakened. I want collectivity is weakened. Now, you could say, again, something that's amazing, so big deal. There's a guy named Joseph Weiler who wrote a quote that you can all remember. Vacuums tend to be filled. Politically, regardless of philosophical truth, it's not expeditious for a country to fall into a relativistic stance. Because if I don't know what's right or wrong, just whatever the law says and the majority imposes is fine. What is truly good for my life is what will help me to advance in a materialistic sense of happiness and contentment, leaving me alone. My culture now is dead from the inside. And when another culture comes that's stronger and that wants it, everyone falls like cards. Be that Islam, be that China, or be that a person who wants to sell something. Because you don't stand for anything. So I'll tell you what to stand for. We're all going to go nude. Or we're all going to dance in a crazy way. Or we're all going to give our money to ganja. Or we're all going to, and whoever's got the biggest voice will win. Because everybody's just saying, just leave me alone. I'll pay you my tithe and you'll leave you alone. And the culture shifts because everybody's been weakened. There's no collective will. Vacuums tend to be filled. So Joseph Weiler went on to say that the West is committing, how did he call it? Suffering from a loss of cultural morale. I love that. And you see why. If I take a sociological understanding of truth, then I can't say that men should fight in battle and that women should have children. I can't say that. I say that is a cultural vision coming from the past that no longer has any place in our world, nor any truth at all. And so what happens? Well, we can't summon men to battle, and we can't summon women to have children. You can't summon women or men to do anything. Right? So I can't sit there and tell other cultures, you should be free. When you listen to Kennedy speak, the freedom, this is a battle of liberty. Who are we to say people should be free? That's our notion of freedom that we're imposing upon them. So let the communists take over if that's what they want to do. We can't stop them. That's not our culture. We're not better. Our culture is to say, everybody do whatever you want. As long as you're happy and you have your ganja and your SUV and your MTV, then you're going to be good. That's a relativistic stance. And I think that's kind of like Sweden. So who loses out? The unborn, the elderly, whoever the majority wants to target, the Catholics. It's easy to demonize. The deplorables, the basket of deplorables, let's get rid of them. Yeah. All we have to do is have the majority say that these people are closed-minded, and then we'll just kill the heck out of them. And who are they to stop us? Because there is no right or wrong. There's only utility. Whatever will give us greatest peace. So if this agent over here keeps saying we have to fight, we have to secure our borders, we have to take care of this, well, we're just going to silence them because they're bothering us. Majority rules. Whoever controls the cultural agents controls the children who obey them, unless the children break free and say, you cultural agents are controlled by politicians who are controlled by educators who are controlled by philosophers. I disagree with your philosophy. So I'll put one more quote up here, because obviously I could just keep going, but I think you need to talk here. This is from Cardinal George. He put it this way: moral relativism leads to tyranny. It's the exact opposite of what people think. Dude, man, just be chill. Let them do what they gotta do. That's their truth. That will lead us to tyranny. And that, frankly, is exactly what you see. I was listening to some of the speeches that people gave about Trump at the Women's March. Horrible. Absolutely horrible. They were completely demonizing a human being. Madonna actually said they should blow up the White House.
Yeah, she'd been thinking about it.
Wanted to blow up the White House. I mean, what violence, what death. She was wishing death on another human being. And then that was enshrined. Like, so once you go from you may to you can, you end up to you must. There's this like slippery slope with relativism. May to you can to you must. So now from you may have a different opinion to I'm allowed to have a different opinion, it's now you must have my opinion. So that's this interesting thing. Moral relativism is a tyranny. It's been shown time and time again. Once you give up truth to the majority will tell you the truth. It's truth. And there's no way around it. Except to fight the majority. In which case, you're into bloodshed. Blood on the streets. The only way to free yourself. No one wants that. That make sense? Do I need to let you cogitate, talk back to me, or can I finish? How you doing? Are you learning still? You learning? Okay. Regina's not learning. Learn. Come on. What do you want to talk? You all right?
Yeah, I got it. I'm just...
I want to now destroy it. So you see what it is. You see its foundations, point 2. Point 3 was this. You see where it leads pragmatically. But philosophically, it's also relatively easy to destroy.
You said once you give up truth to the majority will
tell you its truth. Will force its truth on you. I said, we'll tell you the truth because I want you poetic. And then people were like, well, I don't understand. So, philosophically, it's very easy to argue against this. Practically, number 1. Can it be true that there is no truth? That's the one line you got to remember on the whole class. When you're standing at the table with, Johnny come lately, who thinks he's so smart, and he's like, that's all just cultural. Just be like, is that cultural to say that it's all cultural? Because if it is, then you're an idiot. How can you say, is it true? Tell me, is it true that there's no truth? I just want to be sure you're saying it's right. So you're just contradicting yourself. That is the end of moral relativism right there in a bag. Another point where it's extremely weak is that this means that communication is vain. So again, excuse me for being too poetic, vain from vanum in Latin means empty. So instead of vain, if that's not a word you like, pointless. It's empty, it's vain. It's pointless. Why? Because neither one of us means and can share what the other one means and can share. But this is patently false, guys. This is patently false. This is false. Because, so you guys see what this point is? If I say, for example, that love trumps hate, I'm assuming that you and I both understand the word love, we both understand the word trump, and we both understand the word hate. But what if hate means something different from you than what it means to me? Doesn't do me any good to say it to you. See? So if neither one of us means to share, the other one means to share, and you and I are discussing relativism without knowing